Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for November 11th, 2022. Remember, today is Veterans Day, and I salute those of you in our listening audience and viewing audience who are veterans, as well as all the veterans out there, and pledge that I will continue the work of the LaRouche organization to make sure that we do not have to send more people into bankers' wars to die and sacrifice unnecessarily. And I encourage those of you who are veterans to join us in opposing the war hawks in the U.S. Congress who are continuing to push money into the war in Ukraine, as well as the deployment of U.S. troops all over the world to enforce the so-called sole superpower. Now, it's Friday, so I'm going to take some questions. And let me start with the one I've gotten the most recently on what do I think happened in the U.S. election. Well, the main thing is it was a lost opportunity. What it demonstrated is the total degeneration of U.S. political culture. And this is partly on the population because we've tolerated political leaders who refuse to address the serious crises and instead look for hot-button issues that they can use for a momentary advantage. What about the real issues? I mean, polls show that more than 78% of the population think the country is going in the wrong direction. Those people are also upset about inflation, the inability to keep food on the table, pay for medical expenses, college tuition, and so on. But we also have a war which threatens to become a nuclear war that's supported by the United States in defense of supposedly a democratic fight for freedom, which is actually a despotic regime which has outlawed political opposition. Yes, Ukraine has shut down political parties that oppose the government, shut down independent media, and we're told this is the heroic battle for freedom. Now, who talked about the war? Well, the only thing that came out was when House Minority Leader McCarthy said that the Republicans, if they win the House, may cease to give a blank check to Biden. Well, he was referring to the $60 billion that's been voted up so far and the rumors of another $50 billion to come to give arms to the Ukrainians, to give them money to run their government at a point when that country is bankrupt and when the United States is heading into bankruptcy. But in general, this was not an issue of Republicans or Democrats because members of the Congress in both parties repeatedly vote to provide the weapons, the money for weapons and the running of the Ukrainian government, with the idea, as expressed by the defense secretary, that this is a war to weaken or defeat Russia, not for Ukrainian freedom. So why was this not an issue? Why was there not a competent approach to fighting inflation? Why don't they even talk about the real cause of inflation? It's not government spending. It's not welfare. It's not too many immigrants. It's the control of the credit system by private banking and financial interests who favor speculation over physical economy. That's what inflation comes from when you have an increase in financial aggregates that require monetary aggregates to back them up. This is LaRouche's triple curve function. Where does the money come away from? From production. Do tax cuts solve this? Well, the tax cuts didn't solve it last time because the tax cuts gave corporations more money to buy their own stock. There was no requirement that to qualify for a tax cut, you put it into something productive. So, because that violates the free market. Well, the problem is the neoliberal policy of free market, which includes global free trade, has degraded our industrial economy, degraded our agricultural economy, prevented investment in new infrastructure, and goes hand in hand with a war economy in which the military-industrial complex is quite pleased to have $60 to $110 billion pledged to it for a continuing war that is part of a string of perpetual wars. So why are these not issues? Because millions, hundreds of millions of dollars were poured into campaigns by the private corporate cartel interests, whether it's big pharma, whether it's the military industrial interests, whether it's the cartels in oil and energy. They poured hundreds of millions of dollars into candidates to get them to talk about anything but moving toward a regulated system of credit, which ensures adequate credit for industrialists, for inventors, for entrepreneurs, for agricultural producers, and so on. So we're stuck in a pattern of a war economy and an economic collapse. But the opportunity remains. Here's what was missing. Why was no one talking about the move away from the dollar system that's going on? It's collapsing. The unipolar order is being rejected by most of the world. This is something that's above parties. We need a national mission to restore the physical economy of the United States and do it in collaboration with other nations that are adopting American system methods of investing in physical economic production, including infrastructure. Now, this means we need LaRouche's 4 laws, not privatization and deregulation as the Thatcher model and the so-called Reagan model are, low taxes for the wealthy and so on. No, we need credit for industry. We need a Hamiltonian credit policy. We need regulated banking. So swindlers like those at JP Morgan Chase and Barclays and Bank of America don't get away with creating speculative bubbles that then get bailed out when they collapse, but you lose your money when those bubbles pop. That's not the American system. The American system has a regulated banking system as modeled on what was introduced in the last depression, the 1929 depression, called Glass-Steagall. Franklin Roosevelt introduced it, and it put the banking system on a sound footing for half a century. Repealing it in 1999, what was the effect of that? The bubble economy that we saw blow up in 2008, and the bubble economy that started blowing up in the last quarter of 2019. So LaRouche's 4 laws, where were those being discussed? Well, Diane Sayre and Joel DeJean, 2 LaRouche candidates in the last election. We also have the opportunity to join with other countries who are asking for multilateral cooperation rather than unipolar sole superpower. So help us build our visibility so that our issues can become the issues of the American people. A national mission to restore the American system, which will ensure that we don't have to go to war, but can cooperate with other nations in helping them develop, because that's what they want. And that's what the American people want. The American people want to see our nation prosper for their future of their children and grandchildren. And that's not happening right now. And it doesn't happen under the beggar thy neighbor free market policies of the neoliberals. So that's my take on the U.S. elections. It was a lost opportunity, but it really shows the effect of, 1, the collapse of the unipolar order, and 2, the collapse of the political establishment into degeneration, as opposed to being able to rally people around a true program for development. Now, secondly, very briefly, I was asked about the Ukraine war. What's happening? What does it mean that the Russians are pulling out of Kherson? Does this mean that Ukraine is going to win? And so on and so forth. Well, we're hearing a lot of what I consider to be the effect of premature ejaculation from Western analysts like General Ben Hodges, the retired former head of U.S. forces in Europe, who said Russia will be out of Ukraine by the end of this year and out of Crimea by the middle of next year. I call it premature ejaculation because it may bring momentary satisfaction, but ultimately it's non-productive and does nothing. The fact is that this is going to be a long war. The Russians intend to fulfill their objectives of the special military operation, which is to degrade the Ukrainian military, denazify the country, and enforce the recognition of the legitimate security interests of Russia to be protected from NATO. Now, that's going to continue as an issue for the Russians. Will the West continue to pour billions of dollars into an undemocratic regime for the intent of stopping Russia? And why do they want to stop Russia? because Russia is part of the fight to restore a world of sovereign nations cooperating for mutual development. That's what the BRICS represents. That's what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization represents, the Eurasian Economic Forum. And by trying to stop that, which is what the Anglo-American bankers are trying to do, and why? To defend their bankrupt order, to make sure that whatever you produce is monetized to provide money for them to bail them out while you lose your homes, your jobs, your workplaces, your security, and so on. So the war in Ukraine is a kind of microcosm of the effects of the collapse of the neoliberal order and the desperate effort to keep nations under control. The Russians aren't going along with this, neither are the Chinese. And that's why you hear the bellicose rhetoric coming from both sides of Congress, from the European Union, non-entities like Ursula von der Leyen, who are insisting we're in this to the end. Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, who said that she doesn't care what her German voters think. We're going to keep fighting this war. So I think that people who think the war is over are making a big mistake. And I wouldn't underestimate the intention of Putin and the Russians to protect their national sovereignty from the pillagers and looters of the old empire, which is collapsing. Now, third, I want to just comment on the response to the interview I did that was posted Monday with Alex Kreiner on what he called the obsession of the West with destroying Russia. First, let me thank all of you who wrote to me and asked for copies of his book, the PDF version. I received almost 300 emails, which shows me how many people out there are interested in getting at the truth, even if it means reading a book. That's a good sign. And people wanted to know the real story of the obsession of the British geopoliticians, including those in the United States influenced by British geopolitics, with destroying Russia and Germany. And their view, the view of the British Empire, and I use that term as a real term, not as a symbol, but the British Empire, by which I mean the City of London and its partner on Wall Street, they believe that as long as the U.S. is supporting this empire of funny money, financial capital, that they can impose their will on the world. Now, this unipolar order is collapsing, and that's what we were discussing, Alex and I, in the Monday interview. And an era of multilateral cooperation is coming into existence. We should join it. The West should be part of it, because what's being done by China and other countries is modeled on the Western version of investment where governments play a role as a partner in enabling the investment of future wealth in the form of credit to go into producing those instruments of using science and technology, those machine tools that are necessary to increase the productivity of the entire workforce and therefore the amount of goods available for the entirety of humanity, instead of the imposed scarcity of the Malthusians and their Green New Deal. So I again commend you for wanting to read the book. I hope people who did get it enjoy it. And let's get in this fight. Help us become more visible, because our ideas are crucial. And you can start by going to the Schiller Institute website tomorrow, Saturday the 12th, and watch the discussion on the critical philosophical and scientific legacy of Vladimir Vernadsky, who is one of the people that Lyndon LaRouche points to as someone who helped shape his expertise in economics and in human history. Now, finally, let me just address something that's a philosophical question I received. Someone said, you seem optimistic, especially for someone who's on a terrorist hit list. Do you really think the truth will get out and will succeed? Well, I wouldn't do what I'm doing if I didn't think that. But it's not just something I think, it's something I know because I've studied the development of human civilization. And every effort to suppress the creative impulse of human beings, the goodness of people that may be suppressed for long periods of time, but ultimately comes out. Because what are we talking about? We're talking about what LaRouche often described as the simultaneity of eternity. That each individual lives a short life, but that you can choose to contribute something to the eternal development of the human race. And in that sense, you become immortal. Not that you have statues made of you or that people will be bowing down to you in the future, but that you've contributed something in your limited time on earth that was good for everyone, including you. And I'm not just talking about making money or material possessions or just taking care of a family. I'm talking about knowing that you fought for the truth. You were not satisfied for the bullshit that's passed around as knowledge today, and you made your contribution. Now, it may not be recognized, including by your family and friends. This is a tough fight, but it's a fight that has to be waged and has been waged throughout human history. We started out talking about Veterans Day. Many people gave their lives so that we who are alive today can participate in this fight for truth. And there's a famous Yiddish saying that I encountered through looking at the works of Sholem Aleichem over the years, where he said, "Truth never dies, but it lives a miserable life." Well, I see my task as fighting to make that life less miserable. In fact, to exalt truth. What Helga Zepp LaRouche talked about as the sweetness of truth in her essay on Friedrich Schiller, who, by the way, his birthday was yesterday, November 10th. So, do I believe in it? Yes, I do. Do I think most of the people who listen to this believe in it? I hope so, because that's what makes us human, that we believe we live for a higher purpose, not just for material possessions and fame, but so that our contributions to mankind allow for the improvement of the whole human race, not only in the future, but to pay the debts to those who went before us in the past. So thanks for joining me. I'll have the link for tomorrow's Schiller Institute conference at the bottom of the description page. Otherwise, have a good weekend and join us in the fight for truth.